Welcome to GovCon Unscripted, where we dive into the unfiltered stories and strategies from all around the world of government contracting. Join host Chelsea Roberts as she explores how to navigate, thrive, and win in this complex but lucrative industry.
Welcome to GovCon Unscripted. This is your host, Chelsea Roberts. Today's episode is a part of a series that we're calling Success After Service. We're featuring brilliant minds with wisdom to share from throughout the federal ecosystem, folks that served in the military and have transitioned out and found some success after their time, either in federal or military service. I hope that you enjoy this episode and the series, and if you haven't yet, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast with your friends.
All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to GovCon Unscripted. I'm your host, Chelsea Roberts, CEO of Collaborative Compositions. And today I've got with us Bryon Kroger, founder of Rise8. Bryon, who are you and what do you do?
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I spent 10 years active duty Air Force. I always like to start there because it made me super mission obsessed. The first 7 years I was an intel officer, did mostly targeting operations. And as I tell people, I used really terrible software to do critical missions. That culminated in that huge incident where I thought software played a critical role. And so I actually hung up my intel badge, got assigned to acquisitions, and launched Kessel Run, which was one of the first and probably most successful software factories in the DoD. And after leading that for a couple of years, I got out and started Rise8 to help other people in government do digital transformation. And so that's what we've been doing at Rise8 for the last 7 years. We've scaled up to, we're just north of 170 folks now, continuing to grow at like 50% year over year because there's a huge demand for this. But most important, what I would say is we're focused on solving mission problems. And so I don't view myself as a technologist so much as somebody that creates mission outcomes in production.
I absolutely love that. Such a story of experiencing a problem, solving a problem, and then helping others find solutions to common problems. So I think that's definitely a darling story in this environment, especially when you see folks that are coming in that are really finding that leap in success are billionaire founders that come in and they don't necessarily have that direct experience in serving the mission one-to-one. So I'm curious, like you mentioned digital transformation. Is that still like a buzzword? Is it still like in vogue? Are people still using that? And what does it describe? Like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, no, it's totally out of fashion now. I think it's important. For me, one of the biggest challenges still in this space, everybody's talking about AI now, of course, and rightfully for a while there, it was like blockchain would get you funded. So there was a lot of that, all this advanced technology talk. And then you turn around and look. And when I joined the Air Force as an intelligence officer, I didn't know much about the military. It's certainly not about intelligence. I thought I was going to go do Jason Bourne stuff. And I remember showing up and I couldn't get my computer to turn on. I had this whole saga. It took me like 2 weeks to get logged into my computer. And then my email didn't work.
Yeah.
Our focus is on creating outcomes through software. But even to do that, it's like, I can't just build software. I wish I could just build apps. Like we are really good at building apps. But in order to get my apps into the hands of warfighters, I have to solve insane problems. But they all center around this idea of you've got to become a digital organization. And we've got an analog government that's trying to make its way in a digital world. And that impedance mismatch is what causes almost all of the problems. And is currently limiting our ability to adopt AI, which is a really powerful tool that we need to be adopting. So I still say digital transformation, even though it's out of style, because it represents that core fundamental change that has to happen in the organization before you can do anything with this modern technology.
I am encountering this problem on a daily basis in the work that I do. And I've come across some of the systems just the most arcane and obscure feeling and disconnected. You can tell they just like heaped process after process on after they started adding new systems. And it's become like this, like I envision like the daisy chain of cords of yesteryear when you got all of these like really overloaded power sockets that just have all of these like different cords that go to different sort of solutions. And that's what I've seen in terms of at least industry facing software, like things that industry has to engage with. And then the process is so legacy. Like you want tech support, you're emailing somebody who's got very, very poor email etiquette, and you're trying to like get through and deal with that. So how are you finding like that solving for that digital transformation problem? How effective is that, and how widespread have you found that desire to get there is with all of these sort of legacy favored systems that it's, oh, that's my baby, I can't let it go, or things like that?
Yeah, of course, everybody pays lip service to the mission. What I find is that most of the folks in acquisitions I don't want to badmouth them, they just haven't experienced the mission. When I transitioned to acquisitions and I was leading Kessel Run, I would like famously walk into meetings and tell people that they were getting people killed. Like their deliberation, the cost of delay was lives. This is what I always say. Like you're deliberating in meetings, meeting after meeting, 4 quarters to even make a decision. In the meantime, people are dying. Like the software that you all provided me to do targeting got people killed. I think that level of urgency, you're just never going to have it unless people have experienced it for real and the real consequences of this space. But I would say that it's difficult to get folks to adopt your level of urgency. That I frame it as this catch-22. Of course, we want to tell people all these things, like as extreme as you're getting people killed. But maybe if we just back off from that and we tell them about agile software development and digital transformation, all the things they should be doing, that's not how you change culture. You change culture by changing behavior. Then you run into this catch-22 is I can't change behavior because of all this legacy process that I'm trying to change in the first place. And so what I would say is, rather than being a cynic here and saying everything that's wrong, I showed up. And what I found in acquisitions was actually really great humans trying to do really great work, and they were stymied by the system. And the only way through it, and it is through it, the obstacle is the way here. The first thing you have to do is establish continuous delivery against all odds. So you're not going to get policy relief. You're not going to get waivers. You're not, like all the things that you hear about in LinkedIn land and all the press releases, it's all fake. The first time through is just a slog. And the most important thing you can do is establish continuous delivery, meaning I've got code. How long does it take me to get one change in one line of code from my developer workstation to a production environment where a warfighter can touch it? Once you've established, that's when you can start changing behavior. And when you change behavior, then people change their attitudes and beliefs. And that's what changes culture. And I refer to this as the inverse NUMI maneuver, based on a story of the Japanese joint venture between Toyota and GM, where they had employees who were like drinking and gambling on the job and sabotaging vehicles. And they took them out and had them work in Toyota plants for several months and then brought them back to the US. And that same plant full of the same people went from being shut down by GM to being the highest performing plant in the United States. And so the lesson here is don't try to change thinking to change behavior to change thinking, and culture will follow. And so that's the pattern that we use everywhere we go. I think there's cause for optimism, but I tell you that first time through every time. And it's like starting over every time, almost 10 years ago now. It's crazy. Every time is like starting over, and it's just a slog to get through.
Yeah, it is. And that's a good way to put it. It is a slog to get through. And every new exercise is like dealing with new personalities. And I think in a lot of cases, like cycles and phases of grief, because people are giving up something that they're really uncomfortable doing. And I'm sure that you face resistance internally with things like getting Kessel Run set up. How are some of the challenges that you saw establishing Kessel Run reflected in some of the problems that you're trying to solve now?
Yeah, the first time through is difficult, not because of the policy, but because of the process that's built up around the policy and norms as well. And a lot of times in this space, there's this whole thread around policy reform that gets crazy to me, like acquisition reform, policy reform, everything. I always say F reform. The cavalry is never coming. I've never seen the cavalry come on this. I've been in this space for going on 2 decades, and the cavalry never come on reform. And even when it seemingly does, like every administration comes in, there's like new hope. This administration passed a bunch of acquisition reform stuff. It doesn't change anything on the ground. Yeah. I think the key that I found is to actually go read the policy. And I'll give you one example of the biggest bureaucracy that I was told I was going to face in trying to do continuous software delivery was authorization to operate, the risk management framework bureaucracy around FISM.
Yep.
Everybody's like, oh, RMF sucks. I just went and picked up the RMF. It's actually a great piece of documentation. All NIST documentation is actually really good and worth reading. I wouldn't read it for fun on the weekend, but like very worthwhile to your job if you're in this space. What I found was like within the first few pages, literally the RMF said that not only could I do this, but it encouraged doing it. And it had tips and tricks for doing everything I was trying to do, like already written in there. And so we took the approach of, now there are still some onerous parts of RMF, and in some cases for good reason, because we're trying to protect data, security and privacy.
Right.
But we just figured out, how can we make RMF concurrent with our software development lifecycle?
Right.
And we did it, meaning that like concurrent with our development, we were shipping multiple times a day. We could produce a full body of evidence that is up to NIST standards. And that wasn't actually that hard to do. And every time that somebody would tell me an acquisition policy or whatever was in the way, we would just go read the policy, break it down. Not all of the DoD ones are written as well as NIST documentation for what it's worth. So I won't out and say those ones are good, but every time we did that, we figured out that usually the policy supported what we were trying to do and that we could do it quickly and correctly and be in compliance with whatever we needed. And usually the people who were trying to be the defenders of policy didn't understand the policy at all. And you could quickly expose them in a meeting and get everybody rowing in the same direction. And that's been my general experience with almost everything. There are a few exceptions where there's genuinely bad policy, but I won't get into that one.
Yeah, I can't say that a government policy that I've seen written comes anywhere near the level or quality of NIST and some other regulatory body frameworks that have been put out. So I think that there's definitely room for improvement there on the government side. But from your experience, out of curiosity, let's jump to the now in terms of where Kessel Run. Is that still the play-by-play of what happened after you left and if they were able to continue that on and where it currently stands?
I have an unpopular opinion among my Kessel Run alumni. It's hard to say this about an organization that's still going, but like my opinion, it's not because I left. I left because to me, the writing was on the wall that Kessel Run was dead all the way back in, I would say, early 2019. And like most government projects continued on, and look, they still did great things like Operation Allies Refuge, like Kessel Run came to the rescue and did some incredible stuff. So it's not to take away anything that happened, but Kessel Run was an idea, or maybe I should say an ideal. And it started falling drastically short of its ideals, in my opinion, way back in early 2019. People were like, how can you quit? This is your baby. You poured everything into it. I worked 100-hour weeks. It ran me and my family ragged. And I view it like a chess match that we're playing against the bureaucracy. You can't get overinvested in one game. You have to get invested in the game and learning the game. And so that's what I've been focused on is like, I felt like we were in checkmate in 2019. The bureaucracy beat us, guys. Everybody had invested so much in it. It was their baby. They didn't want to give up on it. But I was like, look, it's checkmate. Let's just go to the next game. I tried to get a bunch of people to leave with me and go play the next game. That didn't work because I had created too much love for the organization. But I will say, again, not to discount anything that they've done since, all the hardworking people that came after, even up until the very end. What I would say is core Kessel Run, which would be the Air Operations Center modernization application replacement for 10.1. It was called Credos towards the end there. That has officially been killed. I was told it was officially killed or ended on March 31st. But the organizational title will still probably continue on. And I'm still excited about their next chapter, and I'm hopeful about the things that are going on. I think it was probably time. Like in the end, I think they made the right decision. I just think that the lesson learned there, what we should walk away with wasn't that Kessel Run failed, but the Air Force failed Kessel Run. Once they failed Kessel Run, though, it's like, okay, we can't keep throwing good money after bad. So yes, kill it.
Right.
But it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like you did this, Air Force.
Have you found that you are in a position now on the industry side to be able to support other organizations within the Air Force that are still looking to hold those ideals of what Kessel Run was established on?
Yeah, maybe not Air Force. We've been largely focused on Space Force, actually, and then Veterans Affairs, I found. I'm very particular about the kind of customer that we take on. I always tell folks part of the magic of Kessel Run was like we had a great industry partner, but like for it to be what it was, because they had other customers that weren't nearly as successful. Of course, I'm biased because I was the customer. So I'm like saying
Sure.
I was a good customer. But even after I left, I think they were a great customer, other people besides me. And so honestly, the Air Force as a whole, with few exceptions, there's some unbelievable people that I still know in the Air Force, but as a whole, as a culture, the way that they were approaching IT, I actually avoided the Air Force for quite some time for reasons I won't go into in detail, but
Yeah.
other than to just say that it's a message to acquisitions professionals everywhere. I think everybody thinks, oh, the government's the 800-pound gorilla in the room and vendors chase us. And actually the vendors you want, which I would assume they would want somebody like me, like it's a two-way street. And if you make yourself unattractive to somebody like me, I just won't do it. I will go focus on the Space Force, who's been amazing as an organization, culturally, the way they're approaching acquisitions, their strategies, notable exceptions, but it's the reverse of the Air Force, where it's like most of it is really great. And like, I'm excited about it. And the people are like ready for change. And the Air Force went down a weird path post Kessel Run. I don't quite understand how it happened. I have theories, but yeah, I have been able to help. I will say nothing has happened on the scale since Kessel Run, which is sad to see, which is to say that no service has really thrown that massive of a budget behind a real modernization project since. Kessel Run total budget for AOC was somewhere around 150 million. And by the time I left, we had grown that budget to 250 million a year. It included a lot of other things, but that's a big program. Most of these software factories have budgets in the like 5 million, maybe. That's been unfortunate, but still, even at those smaller scales, we've been able to leverage synergy across portfolios and create some really outsized outcomes and impact at much lower scale in terms of program dollars.
And this is because you've mentioned a couple of times on delivering outcomes. Do you think that the Kessel Run ended where it did because it wasn't able to demonstrate the outcomes that it did produce and put out there?
No, not quite. I think that was an effect, not a cause. I think Kessel Run was incredible even after I left in the mid 2019 timeframe. So if you looked at their DORA metrics, which are the industry standard benchmarks, lead time, deployment frequency, mean time to restore, change fail rate, and operational reliability, they were off the charts. There's like nobody in all of DoD that I've seen still to this day that can compare to the metrics they were putting up. And this is after I left, so I'm not biased here, but the bureaucracy had really come for them and started to get in the way of a lot of that in various ways. Some direct, in other words, like literally shutting down deployments or not letting them deploy infrastructure to new sites. There was a period where we invested a lot in training our government employees so they could be better product managers, product owners. And they took that budget away and quit training people. And then after one round of turnover, you had a bunch of traditional acquisitions people who didn't have that training. And the hard thing from the community, from the external perception, though, is at every stage up until the very end, it's still just been called Kessel Run. Some people experienced late stage Kessel Run, and they're right to be critical of the changes. Again, I still think that they did better than most program offices, but you just can't debate when you look at the numbers they used to put up where they were deploying multiple times per day to deploying once a week to then later deploying once a month. And I heard at some point couldn't even deploy and the system was so fragile it was like operationally unreliable at certain points. And I think that resulting degradation in their ability to ship and the reliability of what they were shipping was a consequence of the bureaucracy coming back after them and all the changes that happened. The other thing, though, that I will say is their shipping and then their shipping outcomes. This is like another interesting saga. I don't want to mischaracterize this because this happened after I left, but I dedicated a huge portion of our budget to sending our developers, contractors, and military on site to AOC weapon systems around the world, mostly IUD where there was active conflict, but also other AOCs at the other COCOMs. And then I would send our PMs through, I remember the first one I did was Carlo, who works for me now. I sent him to targeteer training. Like, you will go through the same intelligence formal training unit that targeteers go through. Then I want you to go sit on the floor next to the targeteers as you build software for that. Apparently, about 6 months after I left, the various stakeholders came and said, this travel budget's way too high. You got to cut all that travel budget. So what did that do? Severed the connection with the users. not just the relationship aspect, which is also important, but it meant the user-centered design that we were practicing was just doomed to fail. And I think around that same time, deployment frequency is going down. That's your feedback loop for learning. Right. And then also your access to the users and their actual operational environment, like seeing them use your software. And so you've got a slower feedback loop and less connectivity to the actual mission. And so not only is the frequency of deployment going down, but then the outcomes that you're able to achieve with each deployment are going down because you don't have that user-centered design that they were famous for. And again, I want to cage all of that in. I would still put what they were deploying up against what 99% of the DoD vendors and government shops are putting out. But yeah, definitely lost its luster, not just in the stakeholder community and the acquisitions bureaucracy, but even inside of the operational units they were supporting.
And that's something that you can get much more consistently on the industry side. You can maintain those feedback loops, you can maintain those deployment cycles, you can maintain that end user connection and can maintain that connectivity that makes that whole cycle work. So I'm assuming that's going a little bit better for you on the industry side than it was when you had somebody telling you that you couldn't spend that much to do it, right?
Keep in mind, that didn't happen while I was there. Luckily, I fought that to the death. So when I left Kessel Run, we still had that really great opportunity to do that. And I would say it's actually hard on the industry side. What the bureaucracy did to Kessel Run is just what the bureaucracy has always done. I will say, when it comes to interacting with users, most contractors aren't allowed to directly interact with end users, actually. If you look at most contracts, they're handed requirements, specifications, and there's a proxy stakeholder for requirements. Like in the Air Force, it's usually a MAGCOM. So for Kessel Run, the MAGCOM requirements owner would have been ACC, Air Combat Command. And so they're the ones that typically, the user proxies, fight back against you working directly with the end users. And they'll say things like, it's because they don't have time. We want to protect their time. They have an operational mission. But I find the truth is usually once you start shipping software continuously to end users, they love spending their time with you. And they're more than happy to do it because there's high ROI on their time. But usually it's these proxies. Sometimes it's job security. My job is to represent the user. So if you're talking directly to users, what happens to my job kind of thing? And they'll even say things like, I can't tell you the number of times people tell me, Bryon, you can't get your user requirements directly from the user. That 18-year-old airman doesn't know about air operations. And that's true. I'm also not getting my air operations overview from him. I get that from the commander, and I do get that from you all. But the 19-year-old airman still has to operate the software that I'm going to give him. So what I'm getting from him is like, how do you actually do your job? What skills do you have? How do you interact with computers? Like very different than the 40 to 60 to plus age person who did this 20 years ago and barely knows how to work computers. Like you understand the problem, they understand their workflows, and I understand design. So let me design. And I would say, yeah, it's still a problem we face. Like sometimes I try to get it written into the contract that we're allowed to talk directly to users because people will shut it down all the time.
I think that's an aspect of engaging with such a bureaucratic institution that creates some friction in doing business with that institution. So I think that's definitely an area that should be addressed and written into contracts. Frankly, I would vote for that. Now, I'm curious, something has been pushed for this past year with this past administration. It's been around for a while, but this recent administration has been really heavy on pushing towards things. And I'm curious if you've had experience with it and if you are familiar or if you've leveraged it, the software acquisition. Do you know it? Have you used it? What's your experience been with it?
Yeah, I know it intimately. The kind of history on software acquisition pathway is it really got its start back with the SWAP study, a large portion of which was based on Kessel Run. A number of other folks I know in the space heading up that study, and they interviewed us a ton. That led to Section 804 and 806, which I actually helped draft language for. And then I wasn't as involved in the actual NDAA language that went in for final software acquisition pathway language, but I did provide several rounds of edits on it. And it's all based on the methodology that we stood up at Kessel Run, along with a few other key software factory initiatives. So super familiar. I will say it's good and bad. Like, I don't think we need new policies. I was able to do Kessel Run without any new policies. That said, it does make it easier in one sense. and harder in another. So how it makes it easier is obvious if you're familiar with software acquisition pathway, like really opens the door to changing how we think about requirements, the actual contract execution the generation of the contract and then execution. The challenge is anytime you put something like that in writing, the bureaucracy will come and try to use it too. And it's actually handier when it's not a thing that can be pointed to and interpreted in a different way. Because when I was doing Kessel Run, we were the authority on the Kessel Run.
Yeah.
And the people that followed after us will tell you, like Section 31 and Bespin, they were able to do the same thing. Like they're the expert, they're the authority. As soon as it's now software acquisition pathway, everybody's got an opinion on it. And they took things like, I tried to get them to remove the language around MVP and MVCR, minimum viable capability release. MVP is now just basically IOC. So we're just going to call it something new now, but we're going to take the problem, which was IOC FOC, this concept that does not exist in software. And now I'm just going to treat IOC as MVP. And I'm going to treat FOC, fully operational capable, as MVCR. And nothing changed. And so you have a bunch of people showing a 2-year software acquisition pathway or a 3-year one, saying that initial delivery is going to be in 2 or 3 years. Even all the way back 10 years ago in Kessel Run, our first delivery was at day 119. That was an operational delivery to secret network to the warfighter in theater, 119 days. And now we're saying like, all right, building on that, we're going to be super innovative. Let's get initial operational capacity. We're going to call it MVP in 3 years. I guess it's better than a 3-year source selection, but we're just pattern matching and it's unfortunate. So I would love to see them remove that language or change it. I've always said that we should be focused on net value releases. And that is, if I look at the overall value stream I'm delivering to, because every mission thread is a value stream, no different than a factory floor. I would say, does this provide net value to the mission value stream? Which, by the way, I say net value. It doesn't mean there aren't aspects of it that provide negative value. For instance, when you're building a new system and it's early in its development, you don't have all of the data integrations in place. So I might actually be introducing a new manual step where somebody has to copy from an old system into a new system.
Right.
That is okay if it produces net value. So like I've had situations where I introduced 2 manual steps and I still reduce the operator's workflow by 80+%, which is usually our goal. We say 70 to 80% workflow reduction is pretty standard when you're going from analog to digital. I'll have people that push back and they're like, we cannot push that to production. It cannot be operationally accepted because the user has to manually type something. And I'm like, they manually type stuff all day long. They write on whiteboards still. What are you talking about? But unless it's met this IOC standard, which includes all these automated integrations, you can't release it. Ridiculous. Net value release. If it provides net value to the mission, release it.
I love the soundbite of the episode. If it provides that, then just send it. I love that. That's fantastic. I want to get to a couple of other real quick things on Rise8, and then I want to talk to you about this cool nonprofit thing you've started in here in a second. Where did the name Rise8 come from?
It's from a Japanese proverb that I came across in the book Grit by Angela Duckworth. The proverb is fall 7 times, stand up 8. And it's deeper than that. In some cases, it depends on who you ask, but technically if you fell down 7 times, you would stand up 7. So my version of the story is that you stand up greater than when you fell. So it's a transformation story. And I stole the phrasing rise 8 versus like stand up 8 or something. She said, if I ever got it tattooed, I would shorten it to fall 7, rise 8. So I took the rise 8 from that.
I like that. That's a good story. It comes out well. Okay, so now I want to jump into this nonprofit thing. So tell me about that. What is it? What are you doing? Where are you at with it? What's the story?
Yeah, it's not started yet per se. I'm looking for a director to help me stand it up. My goal would be to launch in Q1 of next year. I think that's aggressive, but I'm going to shoot for it. And then when I just put things out, now I have to be held accountable.
Manifest it. Yeah,
do that a lot. I speak things into existence. My goal with that is, as part of Rise8, I started this education mission. I kept thinking, man, I've learned all this stuff. I wish that this learning was available to me when I was trying to start Kessel Run. I learned it all the hard ways. I made tons of mistakes, ones that cost us in major ways. Probably part of the reason the bureaucracy struck back against us. So I started this event called Prodacity. It's an education event, not a conference. I wish I could go back and rebrand it from the beginning to make sure people understood. It is about education and training, more on the leadership side. And then this year we started a new event called Ship Summit, which is more on the practitioner side, like how do you actually build and ship product? And this year we did all of that with AI.
Wow.
So it was really cool, but I lose a ton of money on these events. They are not money makers for us. I can't even say that they're loss leaders. They're not like marketing expenses.
Yeah.
It's really just this passionate side quest that I have to do GovTech education. But long-term, it's mission. I'm happy to do it right now. Eventually, I think it needs its own home that's dedicated and focused on it. And I also think that GovTech education, it just works better nonprofit. Like it should not be for profit. So I said, all right, I got to stand up a nonprofit and transition all of this education mission that we've been doing. We got a bunch of other stuff too, like hackathons, boot camps. We've been looking at leadership retreats for PMOs as a next step.
Yeah.
I want to move all of that into a nonprofit and allow that to focus on education, and will focus on software delivery and transformation.
That is super exciting. I can't wait to see how that comes to be and how that goes for you. I recently started a nonprofit called Conference Kidz, aimed at bringing opportunities for kids to engage in the industries that their parents work in and allow their parents to attend events. Because, I mean, ultimately, I just had my first child recently in July, and it was like, don't want to have to deal with all the family logistics barriers. And I still want to go to these events, but there's really no solution for that. So we can give kids the opportunity to engage and participate industries like logistics and the Department of War's conferences and events and professional events and conferences and so forth. So it's been a journey to get to where we are now. And having just started, it's been a whole different ballgame. So it's a change of pace, it's a change of thinking. And I am looking forward to learning all of the lessons that come from getting that started.
That's awesome. That's an incredible mission. There has to be such demand for that. I have 4 kids, but conference all the time, like the events we put on and then events I attend, it is often the case that parents are like, oh, I can't attend because of kids.
Yeah.
You know, there's joint spouse stuff and they're like, only one of us can attend.
Yeah.
I love that because I also love the idea of my kids getting exposed to the stuff I do. That's incredible. I think it's going to be a raging success.
Awesome. I appreciate that. We'll have to connect and see if it fits with one of the events that you're hosting coming up. So folks that want to know more about you and say they just want to commiserate about the outcomes from Kessel Run, or if they really want to know what you're up to, or they want to work for you, how can they get a hold of you? What's the best way to connect?
First, I'll say no commiserating. I try to avoid cynicism. I've famously said on LinkedIn a few times, and I get a lot of comments when I do, that cynicism is cowardice and you just need rampant optimism in this space. You can be skeptical. Yeah, but you got to be optimistic. And I'm optimistic. I think Kessel Run did great things. We learn a lot from it, and we just take those and move on to the next game against the bureaucracy until we checkmate the bureaucracy. If you want to get in touch with me, start with optimism, or I will just probably ignore you. LinkedIn is where I'm most active. You can follow along there. I open source a lot of my stuff. So like all these lessons I've learned, I've coalesced into what we call our mission operating system. You can find it on our website, but it's just free content. There's not like paywalls to learn more or anything. We put our continuous ATO playbook out on our website as well. So that's available. And if there's other stuff that you're curious about that I don't have content for, I always love feedback of what's going to be the next most valuable thing I can give to the community for free. Please hit me up with that. I will be happy to put together something on a problem you're facing.
I absolutely love that. I have been saying for a long time now that I am a practitioner of righteous optimism. And so I think that's a fantastic philosophy to carry forward and carry with you. I am sure that there are going to be plenty of folks that are going to be reaching out and downloading the content and following you on LinkedIn. So I appreciate you being out there and being a loud voice for those smaller success stories that are few and far in between. So it's really great to see y'all succeeding, and I can't wait to see where you take Rise8 next.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening to GovCon Unscripted this week. Do your part, leave a heart. If you've got some time, leave a comment, share, subscribe, and get the show out to your friends. And we'll see you next week on GovCon Unscripted. Thanks all.
Thanks for listening to this episode of GovCon Unscripted with your host, Chelsea Roberts. Do you have a GovCon story or need guidance in government contracting? Connect with Chelsea on LinkedIn to be a guest on the show or to enhance your business strategy. Don't forget, your network is your net worth. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your growing GovCon community.